Hello, this is Stampy Longnose, and welcome to a Counter-Strike Global Offensive gameplay commentary. The footage that you're going to see in this gameplay is kind of leftover footage from my first look video, which I uploaded the other week, and it's basically a few nice rounds which I played in which I don't die too much in, and these are all taken from my first couple hours of playing, so I'm no pro gamer or anything, but hopefully you will still enjoy this gameplay, and in the future I will be bringing you some more full rounds and full matches, so you can see like a bit more gameplay rather than this switching between multiple different games. And as I said, I have uploaded a first look video which is basically like a mini review of the game, so if you don't want to see just sort of my general opinion on the game and what I think about it, then I leave that video as a link in the description to this video. But what I want to talk about here is basically a beginner's guide to the console versions of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I didn't want to give general Counter-Strike tips, basically because this game's been out so long and I'm so new to it, I didn't really feel qualified to give you really in-depth Counter-Strike tips, as many of the things in this game is sort of carried over from the past versions of this game. But I will hopefully give you a little bit of a beginner's guide and just make your first moments a little bit easier than they otherwise would have been. It is a little bit daunting and overwhelming going into this game. There's a lot of stuff to learn very quickly, and there's a lot of very good players that have come from the PC already playing it. So hopefully this will make your first online games slightly less painful than they otherwise might be. And the first thing I'd recommend doing is not going straight into online play. Do weapon training first. Even though it might sound slightly boring, they've done it in quite an entertaining way. There's a few jokes and stuff in there, and it's just an easy way to sort of learn the controls and sort of see how you sort of move and control your character in the game. Once you've done weapon training, I recommend moving to bots, playing offline, and just sort of doing a few games on there, once again, just to play around with a few of the different weapons. And even though the AI isn't very good and isn't a very accurate representation of how players will actually be playing online, it is useful for learning the controls and stuff, and also learning the maps. You can actually play offline games with no bots or harmless bots, which means they basically won't hurt you, which is a very good way of learning spawn points and sort of learning what choke points in the map people are going to go to, and just sort of what different angles and jumps you can do. So once you've done that, once you're playing against some bots, you sort of learn your controls, I recommend going to the setting menu before going online, and there's quite a lot of stuff which I recommend changing from the default. You can actually map all of the different buttons to different actions in the game. So basically you can have whatever you want to do, you can press whatever your button want to do it. And I've explained that really badly, but basically means that you can change the controls exactly how you want them. You can tailor it exactly to your playstyle. And the defaults are okay. There are a few things that I did like to change. I've set it so my left analog stick, pressing it down, will make you do that 180 spin, which is a very good reaction button. Say if someone's coming up behind me, I can just tap in the left analog stick and I'll be immediately facing them. And I've then set the right bumper to be able to switch between my primary and secondary weapon, and that means that I got my left bumper to go to grenades and my knife and stuff, my right bumper to go to guns, and it just feels like a better way of doing it than pressing Y to go to my primary weapon. And it also makes it much easier for sniping. So say if I snipe in, I aim down my scope, I just have to double tap the right bumper, and then I'm back to using my sniper and I'm out of scope. It's just a very effective way of doing it. I also recommend you changing your sensitivity. I think the default is slightly too slow. I've moved mine up to 1.40, which might be fast for some people, but have an experiment. I don't recommend leaving it on the default. At least try putting it up a little bit, because you want to play very twitchy in this game. You want to be having very fast reactions and getting your aimer on their head as soon as possible, and I think with that slow sensitivity it's going to be very difficult at first. So I recommend putting your sensitivity up and just sort of trying to get used to it until you are accurate enough so you can always be the quicker person to get to the other person's head. I also recommend putting the brightness up, and there's not that many really bright areas in this game, so you're not going to be like flooded with lights at any point. So I recommend putting your brightness up to full. That's what I've done, but obviously it depends on what sort of type of TV and what other settings you have, but definitely put your brightness up a little bit. I also recommend turning off the music, and even though that's going to lose some of the atmosphere of the game, I think that turning off the music and playing with headphones gives you such a huge advantage. You can hear people's footsteps and people firing and stuff, and so being able to sort of sound whore and use your headphones and have the music off does just make the game that bit easier. Something else that I recommend changing is your distance setting, which is supposed to be how far away from the screen you are, and there's just two settings, couch or desktop, and it's supposed to be if you're close up to the screen and it's right in front of your face, you have it set to desktop, and if you're further away looking at a TV, you set it set to couch. I recommend always leaving it on desktop, no matter how far away from your screen and how big your TV is, basically because it makes your gun and your hands slightly smaller on screen, so you've got a little bit more visibility. Something else that you can change is your crosshair behaviour, and you can actually change the colour of your crosshair, but that's basically just down to personal preference. As long as you don't choose a colour which is really difficult to see, you can change the colour of your crosshair. I've changed mine to blue just just because I like the colour blue. But you can also change your crosshair behaviour, and that's slightly more useful and interesting as setting. You'll see that by default it's on dynamic, so you'll notice that in this gameplay, when I'm moving around and when I'm shooting, there's a little bit of bloom and recoil when I fire. You can see that little cross in the middle of my screen expanding, and when that's on dynamic, that's what happens. If you switch it to static, you'll always have just a static cross in the middle of the screen. But what I recommend doing is start off leaving it on dynamic while you're still learning the game. While you're getting used to the guns and learning how much they recoil and stuff, leave it on dynamic as a bit of an aid, so you know that how much less recoil is there when you crouch compared to moving and stuff like that. And once you've learned the weapons, once you've learned how all the different guns handle, and you feel a bit more experienced about handling the different guns, then switch it to static, because having that static cross in the middle of the screen makes it a little bit easier to aim, and you can sort of be a little bit more precise. And if you know how much recoil there'll be anyway, you don't really need it to expand like in the way that it does when it's set to dynamic. Something else that I recommend changing is a setting called switch weapon on pickup, which basically means that whenever you pick up a gun, you automatically switch to it. I personally prefer to have that set to no, just so I can switch for myself. You might want to do it just for ease, but I mean, it doesn't take long to switch guns anyway, so I recommend setting that to no. Something else you might not know is that you can resize your HUD. When on the settings screen, if you press the X button, you can actually expand or retract the size of your HUD. I recommend putting it right to the very edge of the screen to give you as most visibility as possible. Something else that you want to change is your zoom sensitivity. You want to put that all the way up to 1, so basically when you're zooming in with a scoped assault rifle or a sniper rifle, you can just zoom in that bit quicker, and I don't see any downside in having the sensitivity lower, so make sure you put that all the way up to 1. Also, you might want to turn your vibration off, and this is once again down to personal preference, but I think you'll find that most pro players play with vibration off, and apparently it just makes aiming that bit easier. So another thing you might want to think about is turning your vibration off. And that's about everything that I wanted to say in terms of tips. Sorry I've been talking so much about settings and stuff. In my next video I'm going to get into different game types that you should play first and what you should do in what order, and also a few more gameplay tips in terms of aiming and shooting and stuff. But I'm going to end the video here with a nice little final bit of a round here. I get a few nice snipe kills, and this is one of my first ever time sniping, so I hope you found this gameplay useful. I'll have more Counter-Strike content coming up in the future, but that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.